Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of BMA Violet Hour. Tonight, we are hosting the Quilters Quilting Bee. This program has been produced in partnership with the African American Quilters of Baltimore, also known as AAQB. My name is Tracy Beal. I'm the manager of public programs here at the Baltimore Museum of Art. And we are so excited that so many of you have decided to join us for this evening to celebrate the exhibition currently on view called She Knew Where She Was Going, Ben's Quilts and Civil Rights. So as you know, we have a jam-packed schedule this evening. So I'm gonna go over a couple key points so that you know what to expect. Number one, I'm gonna give you some really important information about your quilt square that you're gonna be making this evening. And I'll give you some background information on our participating organization, Black Women Build. So give me a moment, I'm gonna share my screen here. All right, can everyone, oh, no, look at that, just because, right? All righty, perfect. I think you all can see my screen now. If I can get some nut, awesome, okay, good. So tonight, what you can expect, we have a full schedule, like I was saying. The first presentation that you will hear from the exhibition curator, Brittany Luberda. Following her, we are going to hear from Glenda Richardson, who is the president of the African American Quilters of Baltimore. And immediately following those two presentations, we'll have a demonstration led by Rosalind Robinson, who is the educator from the African American Quilters Guild. She's going to lead us through hand quilting at that time. Immediately following her demonstration, we're going to have a Q&A session. And if you want to ask questions during the Q&A session, because we have so many people logged on today, we're going to ask you to use the chat feature, which is at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we possibly can. As you know, we have a lot of people on, so we may not be able to get to everyone. So following the hand quilting demonstration, there will be a presentation by Stella Hendricks. She was the curatorial and education intern from the Souls Grown Deep Foundation and the BMA. Following her presentation, we'll hear from Suzanne Coley. She is the historian for AAQB, and so she's going to give us a lovely presentation. And we're going to round out the evening with machine quilting with Rosalind Robinson once again. So during that time, you will learn how to make your quilt square using a sewing machine. We're also going to follow that up with a Q&A session. Oh, you know what? I missed one Q&A session. My apologies, everyone. There's going to be a Q&A session after Suzanne Coley's presentation. We'll move into machine quilting, and then we'll have another Q&A session for machine quilting. So that's what you can expect tonight. I want to give you a little bit of information, some important information about sending back your quilt squares. Each of you should have received a list of instructions that looks something like this. If you picked up your materials at the BMA, it was in your bag. If you're using your own materials, you could download this form from your website. So on the right-hand side, you'll see step-by-step instructions. On the left-hand side, you'll see instructions for mailing your quilt square back to the BMA. We're asking that everyone has their quilt squares mailed back to the BMA so that they arrive by April 21st. So after your quilt squares arrive at the BMA, the African American Quilters of Baltimore are going to take everyone's quilts and they're going to quilt them together to make a huge community quilt. That community quilt is going to go on display at the museum starting in June of 2021 through around August of 2021. So while the community quilt is on display, you will have an opportunity to enter a drawing to win the community quilt. And during that time, you'll also have an opportunity to donate to our participating organization this evening. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Black Women Build, but they are our participating organization. And while the quilt is on display, you'll be able to donate to that organization as well. If you're not familiar with Black Women Build, they were founded in 2017 by Shelley Halstead. She was unable to join us this evening, but she did send us a short video so that we could hear in her own words her thoughts about the organization. She believes that Black women, in order for them to build intergenerational wealth, with an inherent security in the prosperity that it generates, they must learn the skills necessary to maintain that wealth. Home ownership and the ability to maintain that asset is one way that that can be achieved. Now, Black Women Build, they focus on teaching women not only how to buy homes, but they also teach them how they teach them carpentry skills, electrical skills, plumbing skills, and also just they go through the process of restoring vacant and deteriorated homes in West Baltimore. So we can play the video next from Shelley Halstead from Black Women Build. That should play shortly. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we can see that.
What do you think about when you have a house? What does that mean to you? They can't envision a time when people want to be there, will want to live there. It's about their family, the community, and then Baltimore is a city. So when I saw these houses, I just knew that these were where we should start. Build this, the people will come, and they are coming. You need something, right, that's going to drive you, that compels you to learn, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to teach some skills. We're actually building something together. I want to see us thrive. It's larger than the person. It's larger than the person.
That was wonderful. So now we'll hear from Brittany.
Hello! Oh, I cannot tell you how excited I am to start this event tonight. Welcome, everyone. I know we have people joining us from across America, and that was such an inspirational video, Tracy. And I'm so glad that we're tonight just doing this good work, this inspirational work that for me started with the quilters in this exhibition. I'm the curator of the show. I work at the Baltimore Museum of Art. The title is She Knew Where She Was Going. Stay tuned for why it's called that. That will come later in the event. It opened on March 10th and it will continue through the end of the summer, closing sometime, I think in September, perhaps later too as well. So please look, the BMA is open again to the public. Tickets can be booked online for timed reserved spots. Wear a mask at the moment, but you'll get to choose your date, your time, bring your family and your friends, and the exhibition awaits you. Because so many people are joining us from far away, I'm going to give a glimpse into the show, a sort of preview to start us off this evening. The exhibition was inspired by the acquisition of 5 quilts. Each quilt is made by a quilter from Gee's Bend, Alabama. Gee's Bend is a region, it's a bend in the river, in South Central Alabama. And the story of Gee's Bend begins in 1818 with the founding of a plantation with enslaved people being brought to that site by a man named Joseph Gee. And through the process of emancipation and then later into the sharecropping period in the 19th and 20th centuries, many of the residents didn't leave and have really remained. They can trace their generation to Gee's Bend for 5 or 6 generations now. This is the earliest known photograph of Gee's Bend quilts from around 1911. And you can see a woman throwing quilts over a fence post here. Those quilts all date from the early 20th century, but the BMA acquired quilts. The earliest is on the left from around 50, and the more recent are on the right from the early 1970s. So that's sort of the chronological span of what we're looking at. I'm going to dive right into the physical space for you all. So the 5 quilts are hung in one room at the BMA. You walk through a door, you turn left, and then there's the title of the exhibition, an introduction to the history of Gee's Bend, and also the thesis of the show. This exhibition is very much focused on the 1960s and the civil rights movement and the founding of the Freedom Quilting Bee. As you walk around the room from left to right, it sort of goes in this circle. Each quilt has a unique pattern, and each label describes the pattern of that quilt, a little bit about the maker, and also its relationship to the time period or the architecture in that space. When you exit the exhibition, which is through that passageway that you see on the left-hand side into the galleries, on the left-hand side of that exit, we have a quote from Nettie Young, one of the co-founders of the Freedom Quilting Bee, that talks about the civil rights movement and the quilters marching, the quilters meeting Martin Luther King, the quilters standing up for their ability to participate as full-fledged citizens in American society. And what we have in that exit wall to the right is a link to a website, artbma.org/Gee'sBend, where you can go to learn more about organizations today who are working for voting rights and also Black women's rights in America. Our choice for this exhibition topic was not to focus on the longer history of the region, not necessarily to focus either on one quilter, which are some other choices of exhibitions for Gee's Bend, but to focus on this very unique set of years, 1965 and 1966, when a group of women in Gee's Bend got together and founded the Freedom Quilting Bee. It was a self-enfranchising organization. They sent their quilts out of their community for the very first time and really took over the national stage of quilting, America by storm, so to speak. And that's very much, I think, a testament to the unique creativity of each maker. So Pearly Irby Petway, our 1950s quilt on the left. Since I am in an audience of quilters today, many of you might know this diamond and square pattern, perhaps as economy block. It is a known pattern, one of the most popular during the Depression. But if you look very closely at it, you'll see that the backing stitching has these waves all over the surface of the pattern. Petway did not in any way follow the sort of grid-like lines that are there. She moved, she meandered, she swirled. She went according to her own whim, which is a running theme in the making of these quilts. And on the right, we have housetop, which is based on the way that rafters are hung in a typical Gee's Bend wooden house. Here are some photographs for you of that type of stitching I'm talking about that is unique to the stitcher. This is Nell Hall Williams blocks and strips. It's a My Way pattern. And one of the things I learned about this show, through this show, was that really the standard of excellence in Gee's Bend is not how well you're following a preordained design. It's how well you're expressing your own idea in the attachment of different colors, blocks, shapes, and forms together. So self-expression is really the standard of excellence for these quilts. This quilt on view by Lucy Mingo is a standard pattern called the chestnut bud pattern. It's Lucy Mingo's specialty. And I pulled out an image for you of some of her very fine stitches, which is what she's known for. I interviewed Mingo for the show. She's 89. And she had so many good memories of the Freedom Quilting Bee in Gee's Bend. And my favorite, which I think I can share with you, is talking about meeting Martin Luther King when he came to Gee's Bend in 1965, and sharing that he was shown some good quilts and he was shown some not so good quilts. And she has noted this in her mind, that there was a little bit of a standard of excellence for Gee's Bend that they wanted to show in the broader public. Tonight, We'll be focusing though on creating a block that is based on this quilt by Loretta Petway. The quilt's name is 4-block strip, but as you've seen in your instructions and as we'll hear from our partners in this project tonight, you'll be attaching 5 strips together, and the assembly will be based something like this work by Petway. So we take our inspiration tonight in more ways than one from the G's Men Quilters. And I'd like to introduce now Glenda Richardson, who is the president of the African American Quilters of Baltimore.
My name is Glenda Richardson, and I have been president of the African American Quilters of Baltimore since 2017. I'd like to thank the Baltimore Museum of Art for inviting us to present in conjunction with the G's Bend exhibit, She Knew Where She Was Going. We are deeply honored to be here tonight to lead you in this G's Bend Bee. So I'm going to give you a little history and background information on our guild and the people who will be leading you tonight. I'm going to share my screen. So the African American Quilters of Baltimore was founded in 1989 by the internationally known quilter and quilt artist Barbara Piatilla. Her work told a story of everyday life in her community and of her family's place in American history. And her purpose in founding the Guild was to offer support to African American quilters in an environment of acceptance and welcome, and to encourage the practice of quilting as an expression of a shared history and culture. And since its inception, the AAQB has grown in size and diversity. And currently we have 80 members. We are multi-generational. I think our youngest is 17. Our oldest is over 80. And the skill level of our members ranges from beginner to master and from traditional to contemporary. Now, our core principles reflect those that have guided the G's Bend community of quilters. And one of those principles is to support projects that benefit the greater community. So this includes working with students, faculty, and community activists through the Maryland Institute College of Art to create raffle quilts. And we've raised funds for such organizations as the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, who, by the way, are focused on voter suppression, and for scholarships to increase the diversity of the student body. Our members have made hundreds of quilts to donate to sickle cell disease patients. We've made comfort pillows to medical facilities treating breast cancer patients. And during the pandemic, countless masks to protect our community. And this is one of our raffle quilts that we made with MICA students and faculty. Our motto is each one, teach one. And as with the G's Bend quilters, we place a high priority on passing on the tradition of quilting. Being a member of our guild is a constant teaching and learning experience. We share our experience and knowledge with each other. We also seek out great teachers. And as you can see on the right, here's our own Baltimore genius, Joyce Scott, leading us in a workshop. I think she's kind of adopted our group. She has a soft spot in her heart for quilters because her mother was a quilter, a noted quilter, by the way, Mary Talbot Scott. And on the left, we see one of our members sharing a paper piecing technique with the rest of our group. The AAQB's history includes sharing our knowledge with talks, demonstrations, and workshops at the Textile Museum in DC, the Walters Art Museum, the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian, and the Reginald Lewis Museum of the Maryland African American History and Culture, and many more. We also demonstrate the merits of African American quilts as an art form. And most recently, our Guild has held 3 stellar exhibits at the James E. Lewis Museum at Morgan State University. So we feature all quilt styles from traditional to contemporary. And as individuals, a number of our members have been featured in juried exhibits locally, nationally, and internationally. And some have had their works published in noteworthy catalogs and fiber art magazines. And this is the entrance to our most recent exhibit at Morgan and a gallery view of our fine works. So the AAQB actually has a history of participating in programs in support of the Quilters of Gee's Bend. In 2007, when the Walters Art Museum hosted Gee's Bend, the exhibit titled The Architecture of the Quilt, AAQB organized a series of 20 workshops and family activities in support of that exhibit. And some of our members have very fond memories of the opportunity that this afforded us to interact with the artists. And along that same line, in 2019, the Reginald Lewis Museum mounted Linda Day Clark, the Gee's Bend photographs. In addition to Clark's photographs, there were 3 Gee's Bend quilts on display. And we were able to hold our art talks in a gallery that featured these quilts. And this is a photo of one of our members during that packed art talk. And finally, once all the blocks have been completed by AAQB Master Quilter Catherine Wooten, they will be assembled and quilted by her. Catherine has completed hundreds of quilts in her lifetime, many of which she has donated for charitable causes. Suzanne Coley's presentation at the end of this program will provide more information on Catherine and on the history of and culture of quilting. And now I would like to introduce you to our Director of Education, Rosalind Robinson, who will lead you in constructing your quilt block for this Gee's Bend virtual quilting bee. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenda. Good evening and welcome to the Violet Hour How to Sewing Basics segment of tonight's program. I am Rosalind Robinson, Director of Education in the African American Quilters of Baltimore. I will be demonstrating the Gee's Bend sewing instructions, which were included in the BMA kit or downloaded from the BMA website. Whether you picked up materials from the BMA or are using fabrics from your wonderful stash at home, all who are Zooming with us are invited to create quilt blocks to be included in the Gee's Bend community quilt. If you're using your own fabric, fashion your block in a similar way as described in the demonstration. The ultimate beauty of the quilt will be enhanced by the blocks made from fabric in your personal collection. Starting at the top of the page of the instructions, let's look at each block. Each block has 5 strips, is 15 inches in length and 13 inches wide when complete. Made with 2 different fabrics. Fabrics alternate with each strip placement. Block differences are described in each block and are sewn with 1/4 inch seams. A seam is a line of stitching which holds 2 or more layers of fabric together. Lay out your, okay, let's take a look at the blocks. This is block A. It has 3 blue strips and 2 fancy strips. This is another block A with 3 blue strips and 2 fancy strips, but these strips are blue and not a violet or fuchsia color. The next is block B with 3 purple strips and 2 blue strips. And block C has 3 blue strips and 2 purple strips, the opposite of block B. Now, those people who are making fabrics from their personal fabulous fabric stash, I've made up a couple of samples of what your blocks could look like, fashioned after the ABC block model that I've just shown. This would be a block A type with 3 solids and 2 fancies. Again, 3 solids and 2 fancies. A third with 3 solids and 2 fancies. This would be a block B or C with 2 solids. And I thought I would do one block with coordinating fabrics, both prints or both fancy prints. So these are the kinds of squares that we can make for the community block, the community quilt. So no matter whether you got a kit or you're using fabrics from your own fabulous fabric stash, everyone can participate and contribute to the community quilt. So let's move on. So what are we going to do? We're going to, the first thing we're going to do is take a look at how to sew the strips together. What is the first outcome here? You're going to sew your strips together with a 1/4 inch seam. And the stitching will look like this, where you see the gray stitching across the top. You'll sew along the long edge from end to end. That's what our outcome is for the hand sewers. Okay, how do we do that? That's the outcome. All right, we begin by laying our fabric strips in front of us. In order for block A, B, or C. I will be making block A. Next, we want to check to see if the fabric strips are facing up, with the right or correct side facing up. So what is the right or the correct side? All right, I'm holding a sample of cloth in front of me. This is the correct side. The correct side is the side with the most vibrant, rich color. If it's print, it has the most clear and well-defined lines. This would be the wrong side of the cloth. It is faded and less well-defined. Now, I know that there are some exceptions for this, such as a dual-sided fabric, such as, let's say, damask. It's a dual-sided fabric. Some sides may have a rich side on both sides. I'll let you make that decision based on what your personal, your individual circumstance is. But this is what I mean by right and wrong side. Thank you. All right, so I'm looking at these fabric strips. I'm looking for the more well-defined side, and I've pre-selected these sides to be the right side. And now that I've decided that these are the right sides, I'm now going to move on to the next step. I'm going to ready my needle for sewing. Let's take a look at needles. A sharps needle is probably the best needle for this task. Why? It is long, it is very narrow, it is thin, it's slender, and the point is sharp. You don't have to select a needle that is called a sharp, but rather just select a needle that has these characteristics. Select the needle. And some thread. Now, what color thread? Whenever I use two different color fabrics, I often use a gray color thread. Believe it or not, it just blends in. Or if you're using one fabric color, try to select the color that's close to the fabric that you're using. All right, now let's measure the thread. I'm going to hold the end of the thread in one hand at my shoulder. I'm going to hold my arm out to my side. That's the perfect length thread for your arm. Measure the thread. Hold the thread in your hand. Extend your arm out to your side. That's the perfect length thread for your arm. All right, now, to cut your thread, fold your thread over the blade of the scissors to get a good blunt cut. This makes it easier to get the thread through the eye of the needle. There it is. Goes through very easily. Now pull the thread that you just pulled through the eye of the needle about halfway down the length of the long thread. Halfway down the length of the long thread. Now, hold the end of the thread because we are ready to tie our knot. I'm going to make a sewer's knot. If you know how to make a sewer's knot, go right ahead and make your sewer's knot. Now I'm going to talk to anyone who needs some guidance on this. Hold the needle in one hand, hold the end of the thread in the other. Lay the thread on your index finger. hold it there with your needle. Wrap the thread around the needle. Wrap the thread around the needle about 5 times. Now release the thread. Grab the tip of the needle to continue pressing the needle against your finger, and now put your thumb on the twist. And slide the needle between your fingers. And when you get to the end, there will be a knot. I'll do that one more time because sometimes I believe I was out of view. So I'll do that one more time. It doesn't matter if you, I'll cut this off. Hold the thread, hold the needle, lay the thread on your index finger and hold it there with the needle. Take the thread and wrap it around the needle about 5 times. Let it go. Grab the needle. Grab the needle and slide the needle and the thread between your fingers. And when you get to the end, you will have a knot. Okay. Now I'm going to put my needle down for just a second. We're going to move on to the next step. We're going to prepare our fabric. I'm going to pull 2 forward, strips 1 and 2. I'm going to take these right sides and put them together. Flip strip 2 over onto strip 1. And pin these 2 strips together along the right edge. Through both layers of cloth. And next, I want to mark exactly where I want to stitch. 1/4 inch from the cut edge. That's where the seam needs to be. A seam is a line of stitching that holds 2 or more layers of cloth together. So I'm going to put this cut edge on this line. And I'll place the ruler 1/4 inch away from the edge. And now I'll take a look at some marking tools. All right, this is my favorite, but you may not have this, but you may have some other things that I have in this marking toolbox. You may have wax pencil. That's how that works. I hope you can see that. Or you may have a silver pencil for marking. Or dressmaker's pencil. Or tailor's chalk. may even have some blackboard chalk. Either of these will work. You may even have a pencil. Yes, a pencil will work. If I write on this violet or purple cloth, you can't see it, but I can. You will be able to see it at home. So if you don't have these other tools that I talked about, you can still use a pencil. So I'll talk about another method of marking using just a regular ruler in just a minute. If you don't have this quilter's ruler, I'll show you how to use this regular ruler in just a minute. Okay, I'm going to use this tool. And mark 1/4 inch away from the cut edge. This will be my sewing line. I'm going to set this aside a minute because I promised you I would show you another way to do this task if you don't have a quilter's ruler. You do have a ruler like this, I'm sure, at home. Find the end of the ruler. Find the 0 point on the ruler. Find the 1 inch on the ruler. Find half of the inch on the ruler, and half of an inch is 1/4 inch right here. So the space between 0 and 1/4 of an inch is where you want to mark. Put 0 on the cut edge of the cloth. Put the 1/4 inch inward on the fabric, and that's what you're going to mark. I would mark it in about 3 places and then connect the lines. Using the side of the ruler. There we are. So that's 2 ways to mark. I'm going to move this over. Because this will be strip 3. I'll use that later. All right, now I am ready to sew. Pick up your threaded needle.
So you're going to see buttons that allow you to, click start.
Put it at the end, start at either end, and you're going to go in and out. In and out. Can you put the thing down? In and out along this line. And pull. Your stitches, you will find your stitches will stay more straight if you make about 4 or 5 stitches at a time. Go in and out. In and out. In and out along the line. Try to make about 4 or 5 stitches at a time. Try to make short stitches before pulling. In and out, in and out, in and out. All right. Now, if you've ever sewn before, you know that sometimes the thread tangles, sometimes the thread breaks. And what do? You have to end your stitching. And I want to show you how to end your stitching now. It's okay to end your stitching now. I want to show you how to end it, but we're going to continue stitching. I'm going to show you how to make a knot, but we're going to keep on stitching. Making a knot periodically is good, because if one thread breaks along this entire length of stitching, all the stitching may come out. When I stitch, I always make junctures of knots along the way. So if a thread breaks, only a short distance will come out. So I'm going to show you how to make a knot now. Close to where the thread is coming out of the cloth, I'm going to pick up a couple of threads off of the cloth. Pull the thread through, but not all of it. Leave a loop. Stitch through the loop 3 times. 1, 2, oops, 3. Now pull. Let's do that one more time. Take a couple of threads from the cloth. Pull the thread, but not all the way. Leave a loop. Stitch through the loop. 1, 2, 3. Pull all the way this time. That's a good solid knot. This is a knot that you use to end your stitching along. If you're finished, if your thread breaks, if your thread gets tangled, can't go any further, this is how you end your stitching. Or this is what you can do to take a break between your stitching along the way. On this piece, I may make 1, 2, 3, 4 knots. So if one section, the thread breaks, the whole section doesn't fall apart. Only one section comes apart. So I'm asking you to just keep sewing. Keep sewing. And when you get to this pin, make another knot. When you get to this section, make another knot. And when you get to the end, make a knot in a similar way. Now, to the magic of this evening, I'm going to switch and fast forward to the end. I'm making my last few stitches. Oh, what's happening? Oh, there we are. Making my last couple of stitches. There we are. I'll show you one more time. Pick up a couple of threads. Leave a loop. Stitch through the loop 3 times. 1, 2, 3. See, my thread is doubled. I don't want it doubled. Okay, there we are. And pull. And let's do it one more time. I'm going to do it one more time. Leave a loop. Stitch through the loop. 1, 2. Oh, left a little loop. 3, but I got it. There it is. Pull it tight. Now you can cut your thread. Cut the thread close to the cloth. This is the outcome. Now you are probably not finished. You just go right ahead and sew at your own pace. And when you're finished, just keep watching what I'm doing. I'm going to walk you through the rest of this, the construction of the block. Okay. Going to walk you through the rest of the construction of the block. After you're finished sewing strip 1 to strip 2, open up strip 1 and 2, sewn together, and place it on the board beside strip 3. And now you're going to take strip 3, which is right sides together. This will be the wrong side now because right sides together. Place it on top of strip 3, place it on top of strip 2. Pin them together. Remember, I marked strip 3 earlier, so it's already marked. Pin it. It's already marked. And then you're going to hand sew it the same way that you're hand sewing now on the marked line, 1/4 inch away from the cut edge. After you're finished sewing strip 3 to strip 2, you're going to open strip 3. Take strip 4, flip it over on strip 3. Match the cut edges. Pin. Mark the 1/4 inch line and then stitch. After stitching on strip 4, open strip 4 to the right side, and now you can put on strip 5. Right sides together, flip it, matching the cut edges. Pin, mark, and sew. And you will have your completed block. All right, let's summarize. You will make a block from a kit that you got from the BMA, which contains components for block A, B, or C. Or if you did not get a kit from the BMA, you can make a kit, you can make a block from your own fabulous stash. Like the ones that I showed earlier. Stitching, when you stitch, you want your seams to be 1/4 inch wide. Your stitching can be made by hand or by machine, which I will show you later in the program. And at this time, I will answer questions. So we can open up for questions. So use your hand waving or the hand symbol. Well, Tracy may be able to tell you that.
Yeah, we're going to take questions from the chat. So I wanted to just let you know, Rosalind, you have a lot of fans in the audience. Like people are just, they're raving about your demonstration. Let's
Thank you,
see.
Tracy.
Rosalind, it says that you make teaching an art form. I get a strong feeling that we're going to witness a surge of new quilters in the coming years. But yeah, you've got a lot of fans, a lot of people that have really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
See. There's been so many comments, which is good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. There's been so many comments, and I think you were so thorough. There's not a whole lot of individual questions, but let me skim through here. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I enjoy quilting, and I enjoy having more people join the quilting world. It's plenty of room for all new friends. So it's great to have more people move into this space. I love it.
He was asking if the fabric should be cotton or if there's a special or another type of quilting fabric they should be using.
Preferably cotton. 100% cotton is the best for quilts. Yes.
Someone else asked about the colors, if it mattered as to which colors that they're using.
Their favorite color is our favorite color.
Good answer. They're asking, let's see, Bonita is asking if she should pre-wash her fabric or not.
Now that is a very good question. If she feels, if it's a very robust color and her best sense is that the fabric that she has may bleed. Perhaps if it's a robust navy blue, maybe a batik that may run, maybe that would be a very good decision that her gut feeling is telling her that she should make. So I would ask her to make the best decision that she thinks that ought to be made in that case. Yes.
Let's see. Dorothy Chestnut asked about the weight of the thread that you're using.
I like 50 weight thread for piecing. It's a thinner thread versus 30 weight. It's thick. It's used for the quilting. It may be used for quilting if you want to the thread to take on a more design effect. If you want a thick appearance of the thread, but I use 50 weight for piecing. It may sometimes be called piecing thread. If you use a heavier thread for piecing, if you will, you're going to see it in the seam. And the thread that I use tonight is a 50 weight thread.
Now, in some of the kits, we had a 35, I believe 35 or a 30 weight thread. That'll be good to go as well, right?
30. I'm sorry, 30. Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Wanda is asking about pressing the seams after sewing.
I'm going to get to that. That will be in the second demonstration. Mm-hmm.
The people that are asking if we're going to have a recording of this after the program, and we will. Just hold tight. We'll email you about that. You'll be able to rewatch these demonstrations.
Mm-hmm. I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry, guys. No, a couple people were asking if we were going to show these demonstrations again, and yes, we will. We'll send everyone a link to the demonstration, and when we publish them on YouTube, we'll have just Rosalind's demonstrations. Let's see. All right, I have a couple people asking about showing the knot again. We have a few more minutes in the Q&A. You want to show that again?
Sure. All right. I'll go. Okay. Hold the needle pointing up to the ceiling and hold the end of the thread pointing up to the ceiling. Position your hands like that. Now lay your index finger, point your index finger out. Lay the thread on your index finger and hold it there with your needle. But hold on to the thread. Hold on to the thread. It's important that you hold on to the thread and do not reposition. Just continue to hold the thread in the hand that's holding the thread, this one. Continue to hold it after you put it down on your index finger. Continue to hold the thread. Then begin wrapping the thread around the needle. Now release the thread. Now grab the tip of the needle so that you can press the needle against your finger and take your thumb and hold the twist. Now kind of relax the fingers that are holding the twist and put pressure on the fingers that are holding the needle, because you're going to need that pressure to grab the needle and pull the needle and the thread between your index finger and the thumb that are holding the twists. And when you get to the end of the thread, you're going to have a knot.
That's perfect. I have, let's see, another question. Someone asked about, let's see, African prints. She was saying that she has some African printed material and it has a waxy feel to it. She was wondering if she should remove that.
No, just go ahead. I've used African wax prints. African wax prints, excuse me, do have a seal on. Sometimes they have a seal label on the fabric. If it has a seal label on the fabric, she wouldn't want to remove that seal label. But as far as African wax prints, just go right ahead and use them. She doesn't have to pre-wash them. I've used African wax prints before. Just go right ahead and use them as she would any other fabric.
Do you have any recommendations on where people can buy fabric? I see a few questions about where they can get fabric.
Well, of course, there's Joann's, and then there are quilt shops. I prefer quilt shops. However, quilt shops are a little bit more pricey, but the quality of the materials that are sold in quilt shops are of a higher quality. That is my preference. And then there are specialty shops of various types that sell different kinds of fabrics, ethnic fabrics of all types. And of course, there's always online, and you can find almost anything online. Just type in the kind of fabric that you want, and you will find endless sites available. If there's a particular style you want, Asian, African, let's see, for feed sack, you name it. If there's a particular style, you can find it. A particular artist that you like, you can find it online.
I see a couple of comments here. I think a few people may have gotten strips in their kits that may be a tad bit smaller than the 15 inches. What would you recommend? Would you recommend that they go on and sew forward?
Yes.
If it's a little shorter?
Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. We may have to trim them down a little bit anyway. So go ahead. We'll take the shortest and adjust everything else accordingly. Yes.
Okay, so our last question is the type of thread. I hope I didn't ask you that already. With the type of thread, polyester or cotton?
Cotton, please. Mm-hmm.
So right now, that's about all the time that we have for questions at this moment, but we are going to welcome Rosalind back for machine sewing, so there will be an opportunity to ask questions during that time. So who do we have up next? We actually have Stella Hendricks coming up next. So yeah, if you all still have questions about sewing, you can still enter those in the chat. I am keeping track of those. So now we're going to move on to Stella Hendricks. She was the intern, the curatorial and education intern for the Souls Grown Deep Foundation and the BMA. And she's going to talk to us a little bit about her experience visiting Gee's Bend, Alabama, as well as the Freedom Quilting Bee and the Civil Rights Movement.
All right, thank you, Tracy. And thank you so much, Rosalind, for that excellent demonstration. I'll no longer have to spend around 10 minutes trying to tie a knot for when I sew. So thank you so much. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm grateful to be here and excited to be participating in this quilting bee with you all this evening. Tonight, while you all continue sewing, I'll be speaking a bit more about Gee's Bend and some of the things that I learned while interning at the BMA. As part of my internship, it was through the Souls Grown Deep Foundation, which was established to promote the work of African American artists from the South. As one of their initiatives, they partner with existing museums and help those who are interested in getting into the museum field. As an intern, I was able to work on this project with Brittany along with several others, and I will be sharing my research and the things that I was able to learn in the making of this project, as well as a bit about the trip that I was able to have to Gee's Bend about 2 years ago. So just a little bit of background information. Gee's Bend is a rural town in Alabama that's home to the women who are featured in the exhibition. The tradition of quilting was passed down through their family, and they often learned from a young age from their mothers and grandmothers. During the research of this project and finding out more information about the quilts and the women's lives, one moment in particular stood out. We were especially interested in the 1960s civil rights events that coincided with the founding of a local quilting organization named the Freedom Quilting Bee. This exhibition hopes to share the artwork, journey of the quilters, and celebrate the ethos of creative collectivity that the women shared. One of the quilts in the exhibition, and the one that we're drawing inspiration from tonight, as we talked a little bit about earlier, is Luberda Petway's 4-block strip. Luberda Petway learned to quilt when she was a young girl from her grandmother and completed her first whole quilt at age 11. She said that she didn't like quilting much as a young girl, but learned as a way to help her family and keep warm in the winters. She kept up the tradition of quilting and created 4-block strip in the early 1960s out of repurposed men's clothes, including corduroy fabric and cotton twill. If you're able to see the show in person, I would definitely recommend spending some extra time on this quilt. The stitching that overlays the fabric is really unique in this one, and you can see that the needlework has its own rhythm that really stands apart from the linear nature of the fabric on the quilt. This quilt shows her distinctive quilting style and meditative approach, and it is also part of a series of 3 quilts that she made with the same fabric and a similar form of geometry. This is just one glimpse at her vast creativity and resourcefulness that came out through her quilting skills. In addition to the women being amazing crafters, they also had a lot of other things going on in their life and environment, especially during the 1960s. In 1965, amidst the civil rights movement, the quilters of Gee's Bend were active in their strides for their voting rights. To set the stage for what was currently going on during this time, in the mid-1960s, only 2% of Black people in Alabama, including nearby areas such as Selma, were registered to vote due to various forms of voter suppression. Among these included literacy tests that even those who were college educated of any race wouldn't be able to pass because they were purposely difficult, strenuous paperwork, and limited registration times. The office was only open for about 2 or 3 hours every other week. Protests were organized across the region in opposition to these unfair standards. And here we have a quote by Irene Williams. It is made out of cotton, and the word vote is a central part in the design. It memorializes how important voting was to those in Gee's Bend. It was during 1965 that Martin Luther King Jr. visited the Bend and spoke at Pleasant Grove Baptist Community Church. The quilters were very inspired by his visit and how it aligned with their thoughts and the things that they were already striving for. While he was there, they also showed him some of the quilts that they made. This quilt was made a little bit later than 1965 and isn't featured in the exhibition, but it's a really beautiful quilt that shows how involved the Gee's Bend quilters were during this particular moment. Protests continued in the area and police brutality increased, along with harsher restrictions being implemented in the area. One of these included the shutdown of the local ferry to the nearby town of Camden. Cars were limited in the area, and the ferry provided a faster and more convenient way for many residents of Gee's Bend to go to the next town over for various goods and also access voting registration. This shutdown made things even more difficult than they already were. In February, things escalated even more. Those who were demonstrating at protests began to become arrested and more people were harmed. During one particular demonstration in Marion, Alabama, to honor a civil rights leader that had just been arrested, violence broke out as law enforcement began intimidating and using violence during the vigil. Demonstrators fled to seek safety in a nearby cafe, and while trying to protect his mother, a young man named Jimmy Lee Jackson was shot twice. He passed away in the hospital about a week later. Demonstrations continued, and Jackson's death was one of the main catalysts for the March on Selma that was organized a few weeks later. This was organized by John Lewis from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Hosea Williams, and Martin Luther King Jr. About 600 demonstrators marched over the Edmund Pettus Bridge beginning on March 7, 1965, in their journey to Alabama's capital, Montgomery. However, they were encountered by state troopers on the other side of the bridge who wouldn't let them pass. This first day of marching was known as Bloody Sunday because it was the most cruel acts of violence that erupted during a protest. And they had to restart the march a week later. Around this time, some of the Gee's Bend quilters that participated remember being tear gassed, such as Nettie Young, who states, "And so I marched. I stood for long, I took tear gas. I was not there to hurt nobody. I was not there to do no harm to nobody. I was there to help everybody. Not for one, but for everybody. And I felt like God was there." Lucy Mingo, one of the quilters featured in the exhibition, and another active member participated in the marches as well. She emphasizes in this quote that you can see on the screen that civil rights took a long time and that becoming registered voters was one of their main priorities. This was especially because of the intertwinement with other aspects of society, such as getting a job. Citizens could be fired if they found out that they were repeatedly trying to register to vote. Because of the violence that escalated, the demonstrators had to restart the March on Selma 3 times. The first successful day of the march was on March 21st, and it had about 20,000 people participating. It took 4 days, starting in Selma and ending in the capital, Montgomery. Later that year, in August 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed by Lyndon Johnson, which banned discriminatory voting practices. The passing of this act was greatly inspired by the marches in this area and the terrible conditions that local people suffered. Although the ferry in Camden that was shut down wasn't opened again until over 40 years later in 2006. The following year, in 1966, the quilters established the Freedom Quilting Bee. This was a local quilting cooperative that was founded in order to raise and redistribute funds to the community. Estelle Witherspoon was appointed the first manager, and they decided to name it the Freedom Quilting Bee because it was open for anyone who wanted to come. With the help of a local Episcopal priest who was there to help with civil rights initiatives, they were able to send their quilts to be auctioned in New York. You can see in the picture on the top left, a local photographer studio where the first auction was held. The success of this auction, where hundreds of quilts sold, led to a second one, which came only a few months later at a local church, which you can also see pictured right below it. The auction flyer in the middle was to promote the second auction and was one of the main ways that information about the quilts being sold spread, along with newspaper ads. These two New York events were a huge success and only the beginning of the worldwide acclaim that followed. Hundreds of quilts were sold at both auctions and the money was sent back to the Freedom Quilting Bee. The funds raised allowed for an income source for several families and allowed them to buy appliances and even college tuition in one case. In 1967, a grant of $5,000 was received from the New York Foundation that allowed the group to seek a manager for 1 year to help with quilting production. And after several years, the revenue earned allowed the quilters to open their own quilting center so that they had a communal place to gather and quilt. They named it the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Sewing Center, inspired by his visit there a few years back. The Quilting Bee, was so successful that it went on for decades, only disbanding in 2012 and was the longest successful running cooperative in the local Rehoboth area. After the first auction and increase in popularity, the quilts were featured in Life magazine, Bloomberg's, along with Home and Garden, and various other magazines and institutions. But the women of Gee's Bend used their creativity to nurture their community long before these opportunities came along, through quilting in their church life and just through supporting each other. The Freedom Quilting Bee and the success that followed is one extension of this lifelong practice that also allowed them to get recognized around the world for their innovation and talent. Now the quilts all have one central maker, but were often made in the spirit of collectivity, both through passing on the tradition of quilting through the family and quilting together. By looking at two examples of quilting patterns that were popular in Gee's Bend, it's just one glimpse at the unique history of the region. The women often drew inspiration from their daily life and experiences, and this housetop quilt by Lucy T. Petway is one of the many examples of this. Its vibrant colors and unique patterns of squares with one central one and concentric squares radiating out of it is known in Gee's Bend as a housetop pattern, inspired from what they would see when they would lie down in their bed and look up at the rafters on the ceiling of their house. Lucy T. Petway takes liberty creating a colorful rendition and tying this beautiful quilt together. This next quilt by Nell Hall Williams diverges from a traditional quilting layout and follows her own pattern. This style is typically known as a My Way quilt in Gee's Bend. And it was this specific quilt and a conversation with Nell Hall Williams' daughter, Doris Mooney, that actually inspired the title of this exhibition. When speaking to her mother about her quilting practice, she explained how she would stack up the fabric and lay out what was coming next. She said she would line up all the pieces one at a time, construct the frame, and then get to work. She spoke of this process that her mother used through memory and intention as she knew where she was going. This phrase, we feel, recognizes the rhythm and certainty that's reflected in the quilts and in the women's lives and the power of breaking from traditional patterns, which the women did in both their life and their art, to create various things with both everyday purpose and revolutionary impact culturally. As part of the Souls Grown Deep internship, I was able to travel to the South and visit Gee's Bend firsthand in 2019. I was fortunate to visit with the Curator and Director of Collections of Souls Grown Deep, along with two other interns, Yahari Ortega from the Museum of Fine Arts Boston and Starcea Camara from the Minneapolis Institute of Art, who each worked on their own projects at their respective museums. We took a road trip through the South and were able to visit Atlanta, Selma, Montgomery, and along with Gee's Bend, and meet with a few of the artists who are part of the foundation and talk to them about their creative practice. On the third day, we visited Gee's Bend, and the weather was super warm, and while there, I gained a new understanding of the phrase Southern hospitality. As soon as we drove up, it was a beautiful rural area, and one of the first things that I noticed were the signposts on the side of the road. Throughout Gee's Bend, you can see the quilting trail that was established in 2006 to commemorate 10 of the Gee's Bend stamps that appeared throughout the US. These are featured on these huge log cabins, and in the middle, there is a printed quilt from 10 different makers. While there, we heard a little bit more about how they're planning to revitalize this, expand it as well, and add some more information about the quilters who live there. One of the first people that we met with while there was Mary Margaret Petway. We were invited into the quilters' homes to see quilts, pillows, and other textiles. And as soon as we walked in, from the hand-stitched denim pillowcases on the couch to other fabrics adorning the living room, I was amazed at the decorative aspects that seemed to make up every part of the house. And we hadn't even gotten to the quilts yet. Mary Margaret went to the closet and started spreading out some of the quilts on the bed, one by one, because they were so huge and would often drape over. Some of these she created, and others her family, friends, or neighbors had made as well. The picture in the middle that you can see is one of the ones that she showed us. And this one is actually by Lucy T. Petway, who was her mother and the maker of the quilt that we saw a little bit ago, the housetop pattern. It was really interesting hearing from her about what it was like growing up and her own quilting practice that she learned, along with what it was like to have her mom's quilts in museums. She said that she definitely had her favorites of the ones that she saw, and that it still had the association of just things that would keep her warm at night and things that she grew up around always seeing. We were able to visit another neighbor as well, and just sit in the living room hearing stories about what it was like growing up in the Bend and running around in the area. I heard a lot of stories about the past, none particularly about the Quilting Bee, but still a lot that talked about the central aspect of community that the Quilting Bee represents. We were also able to eat at a local restaurant called Aunt Ruby's Kitchen and meet with some more people from the area. We heard a bit about council participation and the things that they were organizing, such as trying to get together at a festival and ways to get young people involved. It was really the sense that the community is still thriving and living on in innovative ways. The area of Gee's Bend didn't stop in the 1960s and isn't something that's situated in the past. It's still a living and thriving area. We were able to take the local ferry to Camden as well. And I feel that the biggest thing that transformed from my visit was a deeper understanding of the multi-layered nature of exactly what the quilts offered and the importance of preserving them. It was really special to gain a deeper understanding of these fabrics that would hold and support people for decades by being in the community where they were made and being around those who grew up there. And I'm super grateful for the kindness and laughs and inspiration that I got to experience while there, as well as the ability to experience it with 2 other researchers and artists and take this experience back with us to our communities. Using rewoven fabric, the women crafted their own unique histories and asserted their legacy, freedom, and creativity despite who recognized it. Through the Quilting Bee, they were able to support their families and their creativity impact outside of the region and across the globe. These quilts hold the journey of women creating their own way to provide better opportunities for themselves and their community, and continuing a legacy that has inspired many generations. On the show's exhibition page, you can find out more information about organizations that promote voting rights. And I'd like to thank you all. I'm very pleased to now introduce Suzanne Coley, who is the historian for the African American Quilters of Baltimore. There will be a Q&A session for any questions for Suzanne and I after her presentation.
Okay, good evening, everyone. What a pleasure to speak about a subject that brings so much joy to people. Quilting serves as a cultural and artistic bridge with positive and transformative powers for the quilters, the community, and the public. In Baltimore, we're fortunate to have the multi-generational, guild, the African American Quilters of Baltimore. Guilds like AAQB sustain, preserve, and promote the artistry and cultural expressions of this inspiring art form. And this guild, our senior members, many in their 80s and 90s, are a living history. The collective life experiences of the members and their work create a strong ethnographic connection to the city of Baltimore and the art of quilting. Acknowledgements. I would like to acknowledge a few people. First of all, the African American Quilters of Baltimore and the members whose work I'm going to present tonight: Catherine Wooten, Vera Hall, Jacqueline Simpson, Dr. Kim Hall, and I would like to thank Susie Brandt of MICA. I also want to reference the publications I used in my research for this presentation tonight. When preparing this talk tonight, this quote came to mind. Aristotle wrote about how things exist, how things come to be in the world. Likewise, in my talk, I want to address how quilts come to be. The foundation of quilt making is love. It is this love that allows quilts to reflect a range of humanity. Tonight, I will piece the quilts together using the threads of language, expertise, history, freedom, and wit. We will see a mix of Gee's Bend quilts and the quilts made by several AAQB members. Language. Gee's Bend quilts and the best African American quilts in general have a language of their own. They developed a language through color, form, and textile. Needle and fabric are their pens and canvases, recording their experiences, their history, and their worlds. This housetop quilt style is visually balanced and with a colorful concentric squares. Earlier, Stella introduced us to a similar quilt by Lucy T. Petway. This pattern resembles the wooden ceiling rafters in older Gee's Bend log houses. It is as if Lucy is inviting us into her home, guiding us through her daily life, that intimate, private space for living where we find peace, an invitation to see what she sees, feel what she feels. Lucy created this quilt 2 decades earlier than the housetop quilts. It's called the housetop and brick layers with bars. Upon first view, it looks like strips and pieces formed into 5 blocks to create an abstract design. This quilt was inspired by a codified map of her surroundings, the section of the old Petway plantation. These blocks represent architectural structures. On the bottom are 4 small slave cabins. Above them is the largest block, the plantation owner's house, also known as the Big House. On the left are various green infused fabrics to represent fields and crops. The blue on the right is the Alabama River. Shades of gray. When you hear spirituals and feel guidance when burdens are heavy and roads are closed, Jacqueline Simpson of AAQB gives us a mariner's compass for journeys leading out of the dark past into the light of the future. Jackie machine pieced and hand quilted this black and white quilt. A study of mariners' compasses ready for navigation, this quilt gives voice to the Great Migration in America from 1916 to 1970. History. Harriet Tubman by Vera Hall. Vera's needlework is impeccable. The hand stitching is even, small, and precise. Vera uses a variety of applique techniques in her work, such as we see with the owl. She uses broderie purse here, where she cuts a design from one fabric and hand sews it to another fabric to create a scene or a background. This owl is sewn in the traditional way with needle turn applique and thread. No fusible adhesive, no machine. You need a magnifying glass sometimes to see where one fabric ends and the other begins. Her stitches are very tiny, sometimes 20 or more stitches in an inch. When her hand stitching is uneven, jagged, seemingly rough, it is for dramatic effect. The style of the final quilting here highlights people fleeing for their lives. Harriet Tubman's words move like thick night air in this quilt. If you hear the dogs, keep going. If you see the torches in the woods, keep going. If they're shouting after you, keep going. Don't ever stop, keep going. If you want a taste for freedom, keep going. We too sing America, Blacks in the Civil War, 1860 to 1864. Originally from North Carolina, Vera's needlework and quilts are historically aware. She has a series of Black history quilts in which she combines stitching with storytelling. This quilt by Vera refutes the too common idea that Blacks were freed by the Civil War. The map of the United States in the middle depicts the North-South divide and key battle sites of the war. Motifs around the map represent Black struggles for freedom from the Middle Passage on the left to the Civil War on the right. The title is from Langston Hughes's poem, I Too Sing America. Q is for Quandra. During the mid-1800s, when family members married or left home, signature or friendship quilts became tangible mementos. Normally constructed using single pattern squares with signatures, loved ones could wrap themselves in the memories and warmth of the quilters for years. This modern take on the friendship quilt tradition by Vera and her daughter Kim Hall honors native Baltimorean Professor Quandra Prettyman's legacy at Barnard College. The signatures were gathered during the 15th anniversary of Africana Studies at the college. See the signatures on the top and bottom right? Expertise. In 1972, Sears Roebuck awarded the Freedom Quilting Bee a contract to manufacture corduroy pillow shams or decorative pillows. Members of GSBN were able to use their great sewing and needlework skills to make livings as seamstresses and sewers for major manufacturing companies such as Sears. The women transformed the leftover and discarded fabrics into some of the most vibrant and beautiful works of art. Wide wale cotton corduroy is a very dense fabric, making it difficult to sew and work with. Here we see our Cola Petway's Lazy Gal variation from GSBN. Here you see Letitia's Petway from 1975, house top with variation with star medallion, and Essie Bendoff Petway's Flower Garden using hexagons. I would like to pause here to talk about the technique Essie used in her flower garden design, because we will see this again in my presentation. This is a very traditional quilt pattern made with clusters of hexagons to create flower designs or mosaics. And they use a type of quilting style, a technique called English paper piecing. With English paper piecing, you can use very dense, heavy, hard to work with fabrics, such as velvets and corduroy, to make clean, precise designs. With English paper piecing, paper is pre-cut into shapes like you see on the right here, and usually geometrical shapes such as diamonds, hexagons, or octagons. Fabric is wrapped around these papers and hand sewn using a whip stitch like you see on the left. This is the reverse side of the one we previously saw. English paper piecing is still a very popular hand sewn style of quilting in Britain and dates back to the 1700s. Raincoat manufacturer London Fog began in Baltimore and had its headquarters and industrial plant here for over 70 years in the part of Baltimore called London Town. In the 1950s, when AAQB member Catherine Wooten moved from North Carolina to Baltimore, she was one of the first Blacks hired by the company. With outstanding sewing skills, she quickly became the test sewer for engineers who came to the factory to measure speed, efficiency, and quality of production. When London Fog moved their production to Asia, Catherine opened her own fashion house and made couture clothing until retirement. At 89 years old, Catherine is one of the most prolific and versatile quilters in the African American Quilters of Baltimore Guild. She is a living encyclopedia of different quilting, needlework, and dressmaking styles and techniques. She has won numerous awards for dressmaking, tailoring, and quilting over the years. And it is a pleasure to announce that Catherine has been selected to assemble the blocks you are making tonight into a design. She will do all the quilting and final touches on the community quilt that will hang in the Baltimore Museum of Art. Baltimore album quilt. When I visited Vera last week, I was planning to show one of her wedding album quilts. But when she pulled this one from her closet, I had to show it and talk a little bit about Baltimore album quilts. This quilt style originated in Baltimore in the 1840s and is known for its exquisite needlework and fine craftsmanship. Baltimore album quilts reflected the wealth of Baltimore before the Civil War. Before the war, Baltimore was the second largest city in the United States. And these quilts were not made with scraps and leftover fabrics like other quilts during the time. Baltimore album quilts have always been created with new fabrics. They are called albums because the quilt blocks were fashioned after the autograph album book, which is a book, popular in the 1840s. These Baltimore album quilts were fabric versions, if you will, of these rather large square blank books popular with young ladies in the mid-1800s. The ladies would make drawings, watercolors, and write poetry in their albums. Again, we see Catherine Wooten's versatility and high level of skill in various styles of quilting. She can quilt a very abstract, complex geometrical quilt one week and then create a Baltimore album quilt the next. Catherine's ornamental needlework is even, neat, with tiny stitching. We saw Jacqueline Simpson's work in the beginning of the presentation. Born in New York City to parents from St. Thomas, Jackie perfected her sewing skills in the New York City public education system's mandatory home ec classes back in the 60s. By the time she was a teenager, she could make any garment she liked or thought interesting enough to wear. She made her wedding dress with the beautifully embroidered bishop sleeves. Freedom. In this quilt by Vera Hall, Elizabeth Keckley wears a dress with graceful, clean lines, similar to the style she made for First Lady Mary Lincoln Todd in 1861. Elizabeth is standing elegantly in the Red Room of the White House. Born into slavery in Virginia, Elizabeth learned how to sew from her mother. She had exacting technical standards with meticulous needlework and polished designs. Her owners will often hire her out as a seamstress, and she was the primary supporter of her enslavers. In her autobiography, Elizabeth wrote, "With my needle, I kept bread in the mouths of 17 persons." Her excellent needlework skills helped to buy her freedom. As a free woman, she became a civil activist and personal dressmaker to First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln. Here's some more of her dress. This is a dress that she made for First Lady Lincoln, Mary Todd Lincoln, and that's Elizabeth Keckley on the left. Elizabeth made quilts from leftover fabric from her dressmaking. Her most famous quilt is a Mary Todd Lincoln mosaic patchwork quilt that we see here. It's made with scraps from the First Lady's clothing. It's made with silk, velvet, raised hand embroidery, and needlework. Here again, we see the hexagon design that we saw in the G-spin quilt by Essie. They are symmetrical and tessellate perfectly with no gaps and no overlapping. Again, she used the same type of style, English paper piecing that we saw earlier. Ruth Kennedy, G-spin, the turkey tracks. The ability to create a quilt inspired by your surroundings and not think about contracts, sales, deadlines, production, or what others are making, or what others are thinking. That is the most fundamental freedom an artist can have. Pineapple Madness. Jackie's style is characterized by rotational and axial symmetries. Here, she turns the traditional pineapple quilt upside down and all around. She starts with something prescribed and geometrical, then she begins to improvise the pattern and new ideas as she is sewing along. Watercolor Bouquet by Vera Hall. Using patchwork, applique, and embroidery, Vera blends brilliant yellows, vibrant fuchsias, and other blooming colors to give us an expressive view of the natural world. You can smell nature's perfume, that sweet nectar from the garden. The binding is mitered and even with invisible stitching. Wit. Ella May talks about how her mother made dresses out of fertilizer sacks. These sacks had large numbers on them, 6, 8, 2. They couldn't get the numbers off the fabric, no matter how much they washed them. So her mother would buy blue and yellow dye and dyed the sacks before transforming them into beautiful Sunday dresses for church. Ella May talks about how she would wear a yellow dress on the first Sunday and a blue dress on the second. Both Sundays, she would be bare feet. During my recent visit to Catherine's home studio, she was silk screening her designs onto hand-dyed fabric. And she said, I want to experiment with creating my own quilts with textiles that I made. And how free is that? And I went back a week later and she made this quilt when orange is black. And it's absolutely stunning. And it's with her own designs and her own fabric. And she's 89. I mean, something about that is just marvelous. But during this visit, I told Catherine I was going to talk about G-spin quilts. And she said, Suzanne, forget everything people say and concentrate on what you see and you feel. And she goes, tell me, what makes them magical? Right now, what makes them magical? And I said, they tell a truth about humanity, Truth sits somewhere between the binding and the top quilt and that cotton batting. Truth comes in different forms. And that cotton batting, that batting that's made out of cotton, it's picked from the backyard with its prickly boles. And after I said this, Catherine gave me that wise, silent look that she gives, you know, and she walked out of the room. And I thought she was probably going to get some coffee, or, you know, she was going to make a comment about what I said about the Geesben quilts and truth making, you know, that they tell the truth about humanity. And she returned with this large 2-inch stack of papers and said, I inherited these from a master quilter who passed on. And now I'm giving them to you, Suzanne. These old quilt patterns that have been passed around in the Black community, some of them were printed on paper that I've only seen in rare antique books from the 1800s. And she said to me, if you hear the dogs, keep going. If you see the torches in the woods, keep going. If they're shouting after you, keep going. Don't ever stop. Keep going. If you want to taste for freedom, keep going. The seeds of this talk were planted in 2018 when I began interviewing AAQB members and documenting their quilting styles, aesthetic sensibilities, needlework techniques, and personal histories. I wish I could talk more about members of AAQB, and particularly the ones whose works are featured in the book you are now seeing. This is only part 1, and I would like to thank the members of AAQB, and especially the members whose work I discussed tonight. Thank you for allowing me into your homes and your lives. I would like to also thank the Baltimore Museum of Art for creating this opportunity. Special thanks to Tracy Beal, the program manager, and Brittany Luberda, curator of the Geesben exhibition. And Brittany will be joining Stella and me to answer your questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you.
That was amazing. I think we got some people so excited they turned their mics on.
Oh, I think did I get muted at the end when I thanked everyone?
No, we heard you.
Oh, we heard you.
Oh, hey.
Hey,
how are you?
Beautiful.
Hi, Livonia.
That was beautiful. That was beautiful. And that was beautiful.
Wasn't that beautiful? Thanks. Hey, Suzanne and Zeus. Hi.
Hey, Zeus. I just want to
was
thank
beautiful.
Catherine Wooten. Thank you, Catherine Wooten. Thank you, Jacqueline Hall. Thank you, Vera Hall. And thank you, Dr. Kim Hall, for inviting me into your home for the last couple of years.
Brilliant.
And allowing me to ask 1,000,001 questions to document your stories. Thank you, all the AAQB members, for allowing me to take samples of your work and make a book out of them. Because now we have document history of your style, and no one can say you did not exist. Thank
Legacy,
you.
child. Legacy.
Yes.
Legacy.
Beautiful.
Legacy.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Legacy.
Awesome. Absolutely wonderful.
And this is Catherine Wooten's quilt.
Yes.
It's called Made with Love, the title of my talk, because it's about love, everyone.
Yes.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
It's
Outstanding.
amazing, amazing, amazing.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, sisters. Ashe.
Thank you.
Ashe.
Yes.
Ashe. Yes.
Ashe. Impunana.
Impunana. Yes.
This was absolutely amazing, Suzanne. I mean, amazing.
Great. Oh.
God, I can't wait to get the book. I cannot wait to get the book.
Okay.
Email me, Susie, the information so I can get this book. I mean, I got tears in my eyes from listening. Grandmother made quilts and I had no clue, but these people were nice enough to let you into their homes and share. And the history that you have presented, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. I want to let everybody know that we're not quite done yet. I hope that y'all will stick around. That was really beautiful. Stella, your presentation was beautiful as well. And I'm excited to see people get so excited that they jump in. I see Leslie King Hammond here. I see several like,
yes.
I see you all here today.
Yes.
I have a couple questions in the chat that I want to give them a chance to try to answer before we get to our machine quilting session. There was someone who mentioned about the connection between voting and quilt making, and they'd like to see more of that today and like just during these times. And I think that either Brittany or Stella, or maybe even Suzanne, one of you I think can speak to that.
Sure, I can start off. So I think tonight, like we all talked a lot about how quilting really has this powerful ability to bring people together, and how the act of creating and making has this kind of meditative quality that kind of expands the way that you can connect with other people. And as Suzanne mentioned, the love that is shared through creativity and the ability to kind of make your own way and find your own way. And I think through tapping into that and the community building aspect as well is a great start to get started on the other things that you're interested in as well, as in the political sense and voting, and it provides a community to get started with that as well. Brittany, do you have anything you want to add?
Everything I have to say is so practical in comparison to like this much moving experience we just had. I wanted on the most practical level, the BMA has voter registration boxes that will be outside the museum. We continue to do that, and we have voter registration at the museum outside, like a table during those weeks. So if you're talking to somebody and they're not registered to vote, next time we're out there, like, please, like, come see art and we'll mail it. We'll give you the information that's needed. But in terms of one of the things I thought about as a curator for this exhibition too was whether we could call these quilters activist quilters. Like, is this activist art? Is this quilt intended to sort of make change? And maybe not overtly, but the process of these women coming together and founding their own life force, and then allowing us to see it, that makes waves of change to echo Stella's point. No, I had thoughts on that. Maybe Suzanne, anything that comes to mind with quilting and voting?
No, that art has always been political, has a political component to it. So no, I think you answered it.
We have a lot of comments in the chat, like just people just being so excited and extremely overwhelmed by your presentations. They were absolutely beautiful. It says, keep Black families alive. Beautiful presentation, everyone. Salute. I see a couple people that are actually here from Canada and sort of saying hello. It says, Stella, your presentation was really lovely, and it gave us a side of the Gee's Bend story that a lot of people don't get to know. Let's see, amazing, thank you. Someone else said it's an absolute honor to be here. Let's see, we have a couple new ones. I see one question here. Someone is asking why the program is called Violet Hour, and it's a series that's called Violet Hour. So we host different types of programming a couple different times a month, and it happens during the violet hour of the day around 6 p.m. Let's see, voting and quilting was made, the voting quilt was made with ribbon from the Martin Luther King Jr. visit. It was made as a strong statement for voting rights. That's another comment that we have here. Beautiful presentation, Suzanne. People are asking where they can get the book.
Oh, you want me to answer it?
Sure, yeah.
I can answer that question. It is a lookbook. It's an actual book with members' work. So we haven't had it published, but I would love to get it published with some other samples of members' work. So that's something I would like to work on.
So now we have our final demonstration for the evening. We're going to bring on Rosalind Robinson. She's going to walk us through a machine quilting demonstration, and then we'll open up for another Q&A after that.
Hello again, I am Rosalind Robinson, returning for the How to Machine Sewing Basics segment of tonight's program. There are two differences between hand sewing and machine sewing are the way that the fabric is marked and the way that knotting is done. For a machine, we use markings that may be on the machine, or as I'm going to show you today, we're going to mark the machine, and the way that we knot the thread. We don't actually knot the thread. We use a backstitching button or a reverse lever button that you have on your sewing machine. So let's take a look at our finished sample first. Here's a finished sample. It has back stitching at the beginning of the seam. Here's our 1/4 inch wide seam. It's back stitch here. You see extra stitching. Then you see a single row of stitching the entire length. And then at the end, you see back stitching again at the end. Back stitching takes the place of tying a knot in the thread. Back stitching secures the stitching. It makes sure that the stitching stays in the fabric. Let's take a look at this sample. This is an end of fabric without back stitching. And let's see what happens. We're going to pull and the stitching comes out. This end is with back stitching. And the stitching is secure. So we want to always back stitch at the beginning and end of every seam. This takes the place of tying a knot in your thread if you're hand sewing. All right, now we're going to prepare for sewing. It will be step 5 on your instructions. Pin the right side, the right hand side of your fabric strips. All right, now, next I'm going to prepare the machine. Instead of marking the fabric, I'm going to mark the machine with the 1/4 inch marking so that I get a consistent 1/4 inch wide seam. How do I do that? Using this ruler that has 1/4 inch markings, this yellow line is a 1/4 inch line. It's 1/4 inch away from the edge of the ruler. Similarly, I want my stitching to be 1/4 inch away from the cut edge of the fabric. So I'm going to use the ruler to mark 1/4 inch away from the needle, which is going to make that row of stitching. Raise the presser foot, raise the needle, and gently lower the needle onto the 1/4 inch line. And now gently lower the presser foot. I'm going to use a piece of painter's tape and place the painter's tape beside the ruler. This is going to mark where I want the cut edge of the fabric to pass as I sew. So I get consistent 1/4 inch wide seams. I'm marking 1/4 inch away from the needle. Now, gently raise the needle. Raise the presser foot. Remove the ruler. And now I'm ready to sew my 1/4 inch wide seam. As I sew, I want my fabric to pass right by the edge of this tape. Place the cut edge of the fabric at the edge of the tape. Cover the mouth of the throat plate. Your fabric is now in position for sewing. Remember, stitch forward 5 stitches to secure your stitching. Stitch backward and then stitch forward the entire length of this fabric strip. Reverse. Forward. Keep the cut edge of the cloth running right beside the side of the tape. No space between them. All the way down. Stop. Reverse stitch, 5 stitches, and stitch to the end. Cut thread. Now let's check the stitching. Back stitching at the beginning. And here's a 1/4 inch cube I'm using for quick measure. For consistent 1/4 inch seams. Mark your machine. Some machines have markings. Some machines do not have markings. This way you can be sure that you have marked on your machine where the needle is and 1/4 of an inch away from the needle so that you can get consistent 1/4 inch wide seams every time you sew.
Let's see. We can mute a couple people. All right, give us one moment. Can we switch to is Rosalind still on? Did we lose her?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, okay, I'm going to finish that demonstration. After stitching, machine stitching your seam, your 1/4 inch seam, you are now ready to assemble the rest of the block, the rest of these strips to your block. Open block 2 from block 1. Flip over strip 3 onto strip 2 and pin just like the hand sewing group did. Put the right sides together. Edge the right edge, the right hand edge even, pin, and then you would sew along this edge using your sewing machine, a 1/4 inch seam, back stitching at the beginning and at the end. After stitching strip 3, you will stitch put on strip 4, flip it over to strip 3, pin, along the right side, edges even, stitch a 1/4 inch seam, when finished, open up strip 4, flip the right side of strip 5 onto strip 4, pin, and stitch, and your block will be complete. The block would be complete. At this time, I'm going to focus on the back because now we're going to talk about pressing seams.
for this project, we're going to press all seams in one direction. You saw a sample or one of the G-Spin quilts, and none of the seams in this quilt cross over each other. So we can press all seams in one direction for this quilt. I know that we may have a lot of quilters out there that have seen rules about pressing in different directions for various reasons. For this quilt, we're just going to press in one direction. Let's see how that's going to look. I am going to give you a quilt pressing tip. The first thing that you should do when pressing is press down first. Help the stitching relax first. Press downward first. Remove the drawing up of the thread as stitching is completed. Help the stitching relax first. Notice I'm not moving back and forth. Just press downward with steam. Next, I'm going to do directional pressing now. I'm going to press in the same direction as the seam allowance is going. The seam allowance is between the stitching and the cut edge. That's the direction in which I'm going to press from the right side of the cloth. From the right side. I'm going to press in the same direction as the seam allowance is pointing. It is pointing this way. That's the direction in which I am going to press. It's going this way. That's the direction in which I'm going to move the iron to make the fabric roll over at the stitching. I want it to roll over at the stitching. I want it to roll over at the stitching so that there is no pleat at that seam. It's completely flat. It is completely flat, no pleat between this, the fancy section, and the blue. I always press in the same direction as the seam allowance is pointing. I can point it in either direction, any direction I want to point it, but always move the iron in the direction in which you want the seam allowance to be and move it in that direction. I'll show you again. I can make it go in any direction. Let's see. I'll show you on this sample. Here's the seam allowance right here. It's going in this direction toward me. I lay it on the table, going toward me. So I'm going to press toward the blue. I'm just showing you that I'm going to move the iron in the direction of the seam allowance. And this is how you get your seam allowance to uncurl and get a nice flat seam.
That makes your seam flat. Okay. So that's pressing. Everyone should press all of their seams with all the seams going in one direction. Press it flat first, and then with all of them going in one direction. All right, at this time, I'm going to summarize the machine sewing demonstration. First, you should prepare your sewing machine to stitch a 1/4 inch seam. I spoke tonight as if you do not have a 1/4 inch presser foot. But if you do, if you are certain that you have a 1/4 inch presser foot, by all means use that. But because if you do have one, you know you have one. If you don't have a one, or if you don't know if your presser foot is 1/4 inch wide, you can do the calculations, or you can use the method that I shared with you this evening, because not all presser feet will yield a 1/4 inch wide seam. Presser feet have various widths on various different machines. There are some 1/4 inch presser feet out there, but I assume that we did not have any this evening. I want you to be prepared to get a 1/4 inch seam. Okay. The next item I want to point out is that you definitely want to backstitch at the beginning and end of your sewing. That's how you make a knot or secure your stitching using a sewing machine. You backstitch about 5 stitches based on using the standard 10 to 12 stitches per inch setting on your sewing machine. Sewing machines use various ways of determining what is a standard stitch for that machine. Some use a single number, some use 10 to 12. I really didn't want to address that, but whatever setting will yield 10 to 12 stitches per inch, that's what you want to use. You, when pressing, press flat first, and then press directionally in press the seam in the direction in which you want to go, the seam allowance to go, to roll the top cloth over completely down to the stitching so that there's no pleat there. And finally, when you're finished your block, mail it to the BMA, because I sure look forward to seeing those beautiful blocks. And at this time, if there are any questions, Tracy, would you open the audience up for questions? Thank you.
We're open for questions. Let's see, we have a few. I think I just saw one about pressing seams. Do you have special tricks for how to press when you do want open seams?
Open seams. Again, press the seam flat first. The way that you saw me, press flat first. Okay. I have to retrain this piece. Press flat first to make the thread and the fabric relax, and then open the seam. With steam. And if you want further help, I would say that this wool pad is great. It helps to make your fabric lie flat
I like it. I love it. And use steam. If fabric is being has some crinkles in it, sometimes I use a spray, a clear spray. But there's a spray product that you can use. It's not starch, but a spray product, and it really helps to make the fabric relax and take out wrinkles.
Put the earbuds in. Get your earbuds.
I have another question here. It says, oh, moving so fast. Does it matter if the strips are cut straight grain or cross grain? Oh, wait, can you hear me? Are you able to hear me? I'll say it again. So someone had a question, Rosalind, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Mm-hmm.
They asked, does it matter if the strips are cut straight grain or cross grain?
I believe we cut the length. This is the lengthwise grain. This is the crosswise grain, but it really doesn't make any difference because some of the strips are going to go this way and some will go this way. So it really doesn't make a difference, except for the design on the cloth. If there's a one-way design, then we will have to place the strips according to the design. If there's a one-way design on the fabric, right, we will place the fabric according to the design on the fabric. I'm having audio troubles here.
I can hear you.
Okay.
You were a little choppy for a second, but I can still hear you right now.
Okay, I'm coming back in. You're coming back in. Okay.
Hear me? It could be me. Okay.
All right, I hear you now.
Is backstitching needed when you chain piece?
Yes, I do backstitch when I chain piece.
Quick and simple. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Someone else said thank you for the pressing tips. There's a couple thank yous for the tips on relaxing the fabric and pressing the fabric. Another comment saying extraordinary presentation.
Thank you.
Someone just asked if they should sign the blocks. I don't think you necessarily need to sign the blocks, but there is a form that you can fill out to send with your block so that we have your name and the city and state where you're from. Let's see. I'm trying to see if we have any more like logistical questions about sewing. I think we've answered this one before. Preferences on colors of fabric. If you don't mind, just sort of speaking to that one more time.
Your favorite color is our favorite color. So, but we want your signature to be a part of this quilt. So please feel free to express yourself, and that will add to the beauty of the quilt. There was one thing I wanted to say, and it was about this device. I did not mention it because it's made by a certain company. It's just chalk. It's just chalk in a tube. It's chalk in a tube. It's powder chalk.
Thank you for the presentation. What is the width of the strips? I'm just have you speak to that one again.
These strips are 15 inches by 3 inches.
I see a few questions about, oh, someone complimented your necklace. I see a few questions about donations. Donations for this particular program will start in June. And so you'll have the opportunity to donate to Black Women Build, while you also enter the drawing to win the community quilt. I see a few other people here that are asking about donating to AAQB, and that is something that they can do as well. We want to keep you guys alive. Let's see. How many blocks can be submitted? Do you want to speak to that at all, Rosalind? I know we might get a lot.
More the merrier. That would be lovely, I would think. Mhm.
I'm trying to give it a couple more minutes here. Will it be possible to watch this again? I missed the first part. Yes.
Can you switch it to the computer? I think I'm dying. Yeah. Okay.
It'll pick it up. Just put them.
I'm just double checking. I think we might have gone through all of our questions about machine sewing and hand sewing. I hope that everybody can hear me. My audio has been terrible tonight. So it looks like we've gotten to all of the questions about machine sewing and hand sewing. Someone's asking if we'll make multiple quilts or will there just be one? We're looking at there possibly just being, the idea was to make just one, but we've also had a lot of people that are participating in this program. So let's see how things turn out. Let's see. I think we answered the question about recording. Can you all hear me very well at all? Just give me some yeses or no's. Okay, I'm seeing some folks can't hear me. Yes, this program will be recorded. Lots of thank yous. When are the quilt squares due back? The quilt squares are due back to the BMA. We would like for them to arrive by April 21st. All right. We will prefer that the quilt squares are mailed to the BMA, and there's a couple reasons for that. Social distancing is one reason. Another reason is just for conservation reasons in terms of like the safety of the actual art. I have been getting quite a few people asking about being able to drop fabrics off. So if you guys will hold tight just a little bit, I think we should be able to pick a day, like probably one day or two, that we can allow folks to come and drop off quilts if you absolutely are unable to make it to the post office to send your quilts in. I would hate for people to not be able to participate simply because they can't make it to the post office. Someone is asking, Rosalind, they're asking, is it okay if they embellish their squares, or would you prefer them not to?
As long as it would not impede quilting, buttons or anything that would be raised up off of the surface, or anything hard may impede quilting. It will be long arm quilted. So keep that in mind, please. No stones, please, or something that would break a needle, because it will be long arm quilted.
I think we're rounding this out, so I've gotten a few emails about a potential drop-off day, as well as a few comments in the chat here about scheduling a drop-off day. So if you've signed up for tonight's program, we have your email address, and we will follow up with you with instructions on moving forward. Just in case it is helpful to some people, I'm going to share my screen one more time so that you can see the address of the BMA. For those of you, so this is the BMA address, and that is 10 Art Museum Drive, zip code 21218. So I guess we're ending tonight's program. I'm sorry, I'm like personally just overwhelmed by how awesome this was. I want to thank everyone who participated tonight. I definitely want to thank all of the members of the African American Quilters of Baltimore, and specifically thank our members that were here with us today: Rosalind Robinson, Glenda Richardson, Suzanne Coley. You all were absolutely amazing, not just in your presentations this evening, but in the process of producing this program. So thank you so much. Brittany Luberda, thank you so much for everything that you've done in support of the program. And definitely Stella Hendricks, you did a fabulous job this evening. So thank you so much. I also want to thank the BMA's marketing department, as well as the education department here at the BMA. So folks, so please stay tuned to your emails. We will be following up with you with more program information as we get closer to June and the display of the final community quilt. As I said before, the due date for your quilts is going to be April 21st. You want to try to get them to us by April 21st. And yeah, so thank you so much for joining us this evening for a very special edition of BMA Violet Hour, and you will be hearing from us soon. Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thanks.